My name is Deidre, and at 32, I finally built a life worth living after escaping my toxic family. As a marketing executive with a peaceful home in Seattle, I thought I had put the past behind me. Then my sister Amanda decided she could not stand seeing me happy without them. When our grandmother Eleanor turned 80, Amanda orchestrated what she thought would be my ultimate humiliation. She hired private investigators, planning to expose my new life as a fraud in front of our entire family. Before I tell you how my sister's revenge plan backfired spectacularly, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit subscribe if you've ever had to distance yourself from toxic family members for your own sanity. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Boston, in a white colonial house with blue shutters that looked picture-perfect from the outside. Our lawn was always meticulously maintained, the hedges perfectly trimmed, and the flower beds arranged with military precision. My father Richard insisted on this flawless exterior. It was a metaphor for our family life. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but behind closed doors it was anything but. Amanda came along when I was 2. In those early years, we were actually close. I remember teaching her how to tie her shoes and helping her learn the alphabet. I still have a crayon drawing she made for me when she was 4. It shows 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. Me and Dee Dee, it says in wobbly letters. Sometimes I look at it and wonder what happened to that little girl who loved her big sister. My father Richard worked as a financial advisor, and he brought his competitive nature home with him every night. From an early age, he pitted Amanda and me against each other. Look at Deidre's report card, Amanda. All A's. Why can't you do that? Or Amanda won first place in her dance recital. You should take notes, Deidre. It was subtle at first, but it created a foundation of rivalry that would eventually destroy our relationship. Our mother Catherine was beautiful, soft-spoken, and completely dominated by our father. She never contradicted him, never stood up for either of us when he was being unfair. She would just give us sad looks from across the dinner table, and later slip us cookies or small gifts, as if those could make up for her silence. She was there physically, but absent emotionally, too afraid of my father's temper to be the mother we needed. The only real source of unconditional love in our family was our grandmother, Eleanor, my father's mother. She lived about 30 minutes away, and visits to her house were like entering a different universe. There were no competitions at Grandma Eleanor's, no walking on eggshells. There were fresh-baked cookies, old photo albums, and long talks on her porch swing. She told us stories about her youth, taught us card games, and always made us feel equally loved. You are both precious in your own way, she would tell us. Never let anyone make you feel less than wonderful, exactly as you are. But those visits were too infrequent to counteract the daily dynamics at home. As we grew older, I retreated into academics. School made sense to me. Work hard, get good results. The rules were clear, and the validation came from outside our toxic household. Amanda took a different approach. She figured out early that the easiest path to our father's approval was to align herself with him against me. By middle school, the sweet little sister who had once drawn me pictures was gone. In her place was a girl who had accidentally spilled juice on my science project the night before it was due. A girl who would tell my friends embarrassing stories about me at sleepovers. A girl who would whisper to our father about things I had done wrong, real or imagined, and then smirk at me across the dinner table as I was being lectured. When I was 16 and Amanda 14, I applied for a prestigious summer program at Boston University. It required an essay, letters of recommendation, and a portfolio of work. I spent months preparing my application. The night before it was due, I left everything neatly organized on my desk. The next morning, the essay was mysteriously missing. I tore my room apart looking for it, finally had to print a rough draft and rush to submit my incomplete application. I was rejected. Months later, I found my original essay crumpled behind Amanda's dresser while looking for a sweater she had borrowed. When I confronted her, she just shrugged and said, "You're not special, Deidre. You needed to learn that." What hurt most was that when I told our parents, they accused me of being dramatic and making excuses for my failure. By the time we entered high school, our roles were firmly established. Amanda was the family favorite, bright and charming in public, manipulative and cruel in private. I was the scapegoat, the one who could never do anything right despite my accomplishments. Amanda dated the popular boys, was elected homecoming queen, and maintained a careful facade of perfection. Meanwhile, I buried myself in books, developed a small circle of loyal friends, and counted the days until I could leave for college. Looking back now, I can see the signs of our family dysfunction that I was too young to recognize then. The way my father would control every aspect of our lives, from what we wore to who we could be friends with. The way my mother would drink 2 glasses of wine every night, her hands slightly shaking as she poured the second. The way holiday gatherings would inevitably end with tense silences or explosive arguments. But at the time, it just felt normal because it was all I knew. What I did not know then was how deeply Amanda had internalized our father's values. She did not just want his approval, she wanted to become him. And like him, she could not stand to see me succeed or be happy. It was as if my joy somehow diminished hers. This dynamic would continue to play out between us long after we left our childhood home, with consequences neither of us could have imagined. Fast forward to when I was 25. I had managed to get through college on scholarships, student loans, and by working part-time jobs. My parents had refused to help financially after I chose to attend a state university rather than my father's alma mater. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Boston while taking night classes to earn my MBA. It was not glamorous, but it was mine. I had a tiny apartment with secondhand furniture, a job with potential, and for the first time, I was making my own decisions. I was building something real, brick by brick. Then came the family dinner that would change everything. Amanda had called a special Sunday dinner to announce her engagement to James, the son of one of Boston's wealthiest families. James was handsome, Harvard-educated, and worked at his father's investment firm. He was also clearly besotted with Amanda, who had masterfully presented herself as the perfect potential wife. That evening, I arrived at my parents' house in a new dress I had splurged on, feeling good about myself and genuinely happy for my sister, despite our history. "Oh, Deidre," my mother said when I walked in, eyeing my dress, "that color washes you out completely. You should have asked Amanda for advice before buying something so unflattering." I took a deep breath and smiled. "It's nice to see you too, Mom." The dinner was a showcase for Amanda and James. My parents fawned over them while I sat quietly, trying to be supportive. When I mentioned a successful campaign I had recently worked on, my father cut me off. "Nobody wants to hear about budget marketing, Deidre. James was just telling us about his promotion. He will be managing millions in client portfolios." "Millions," Amanda echoed, flashing her enormous diamond ring. "While some people are still taking classes and hoping for a real career someday." James looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. I noticed that pattern throughout the evening. He seemed kind but completely unaware of the family dynamics he was marrying into. After dessert, Amanda announced that they had already purchased a house in Beacon Hill. Daddy helped with the down payment, of course. "It was the least we could do for our little girl," my father said, beaming at her. "You never offered to help me with housing," I said before I could stop myself. The table went silent. My father's face darkened. "You chose to be independent, Deidre. You made it clear you did not want our help. I wanted your support. There is a difference." Amanda laughed. "Always the victim, aren't you? Some things never change." Something in me snapped. Years of swallowed anger bubbled to the surface. You know what else never changes? This family's inability to see Amanda for who she really is. What followed was the most explosive argument of my life. Years of resentment poured out. I brought up the sabotaged application, the constant undermining, the blatant favoritism. My parents defended Amanda reflexively, accusing me of jealousy and ingratitude. And then came the bombshell. "Why don't you tell James about the student loans you took out in my name?" I demanded of my father. The room went completely still. James looked confused. My mother suddenly became very interested in folding and refolding her napkin. "What is she talking about, Richard?" James asked my father. My father's face went from red to purple. "Deidre is confused. We helped her with some paperwork for her loans, that's all." But I was done being gaslit. 3 years ago, I got rejected for an apartment because my credit check showed $60,000 in student loan debt that I did not take out. I spent months unraveling what happened. Care to explain, Dad? Or should I? My mother started crying. My father stood up, pointing his finger at me. How dare you bring this up now? After everything we have done for you, you stole my identity. You and Mom took out loans in my name to pay for renovations on this house and to fund Amanda's wedding. That is what you did for me. James was looking between us all, clearly stunned. Is this true? He asked Amanda. Amanda rolled her eyes. Deidre is being dramatic as usual. She signed the papers herself. She was just too stupid to read them first. That was a lie. I had never signed anything. But it revealed that Amanda knew about the fraud all along. The confrontation continued to escalate. My father admitted to borrowing my identity, but insisted he had planned to pay the loans back eventually. My mother pleaded ignorance while simultaneously telling me I should be happy to help the family. Amanda watched it all with a smug expression, occasionally whispering to James, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. In the middle of this chaos, my grandmother Eleanor, who had been invited for the engagement announcement, quietly took my hand under the table and squeezed it. When I looked at her, she gave me a small nod, and I knew she believed me. As the evening imploded, I made the hardest decision of my life. I stood up, looked around at my family, and said, I'm done. Do not contact me again. My father laughed dismissively. Don't be ridiculous. Where will you go? What will you do without us? I'll be better, I said simply. As I gathered my things to leave, my grandmother followed me to the door. She pressed an envelope into my hand. I have been saving for both you girls since you were born, she whispered. This was going to be for your wedding someday, but I think you need it more now. Go build a good life, Deidre. A real one. The envelope contained $20,000 in cash. It was her life savings, I later learned. I can't take this. I tried to give it back. You can and you will, she said firmly. Just promise you'll stay in touch with me, secretly if necessary. I hugged her tightly, breathing in her familiar scent of lavender and home. I love you, Grandma. I love you too. Now go become the woman I know you can be. 2 weeks later, I had quit my job, packed my meager belongings, and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle, as far from Boston as I could get while staying in the country. I had no job lined up, no friends waiting, nothing but the determination to start over and Grandma Eleanor's blessing in my pocket. I did not say goodbye to my parents or Amanda. I simply disappeared, leaving no forwarding address. The only connection to my past I maintained was a burner phone that only my grandmother had the number to. It was drastic, but necessary. I knew that if I left any door open, they would use it to continue their toxic patterns. As the plane took off from Logan Airport, I pressed my face against the window and watched Boston disappear beneath me. I was terrified. But for the first time in my life, I was also free. My first apartment in Seattle was barely more than a closet. A 300-square-foot studio with a hot plate instead of a proper stove and a shower so small I had to soap up before getting in because there was no room to turn around. But it was mine, paid for with my own money, and when I closed that door at night, no one could hurt me. Finding a job was harder than I expected. The marketing scene in Seattle was competitive, and I had left Boston without references. I started waitressing at a small cafe near Pike Place Market while sending out dozens of resumes each week. The rejection emails piled up, but I kept trying. One rainy Tuesday, a customer at the cafe noticed me working on my laptop during my break. She asked what I was doing, and I explained I was revising my portfolio. Jasmine turned out to be the creative director at a mid-sized marketing agency. She liked my honesty and my work ethic enough to offer me an interview. 2 weeks later, I was working as a junior copywriter. The pay was modest, but it was in my field, and it came with health insurance. Jasmine quickly became more than a boss. She introduced me to her friend Marcus, who ran a local community theater. The three of us started having Sunday brunches that turned into my first real friend group in Seattle. They never pushed when I was vague about my past, but offered the kind of unconditional support I had only ever gotten from my grandmother. Family is who shows up, Marcus would say, not who shares your DNA. Slowly, I began to build a life. I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma, Dr. Sarah. The first time I told her my full story, I broke down completely. What you're describing is financial abuse and emotional manipulation, she said gently. It's not your fault and you're not alone. Week by week, we unpacked my childhood. I learned about scapegoating, gaslighting, and narcissistic family systems. I began to understand that the problem was never me, but the toxic dynamics I had been trapped in. It did not erase the pain, but it gave me a framework to process it. My credit was still a disaster from my father's fraud, but I was addressing it systematically. I filed police reports, worked with credit agencies, and slowly untangled the financial mess. It was exhausting and often humiliating, but with each resolved issue, I reclaimed another piece of my independence. At work, I threw myself into every project, volunteered for the difficult clients, stayed late to learn new skills. My determination did not go unnoticed. Within 2 years, I was promoted to senior copywriter. A year after that, I became a content strategist. Throughout this time, I maintained my promise to Grandma Eleanor. We spoke every Sunday night, carefully avoiding discussing the rest of the family. She sent me birthday cards to a P.O. box I had set up, and I mailed her small gifts from Seattle. She was my one safe connection to the past. Dating was more challenging. Trust did not come easily to me anymore. I went on a few disastrous first dates, then decided to focus on myself for a while. I joined a hiking group, took pottery classes, and volunteered at an animal shelter. I was building not just a life, but an identity separate from the family narrative. Then I met Thomas at a marketing conference. He was speaking about ethical advertising practices, and I was struck by his integrity as much as his good looks. We started with coffee that turned into dinner, that turned into a 5-hour conversation. When I finally opened up about my past, after several months of dating, he listened without judgment. "Thank you for trusting me with that," was all he said. But the way he held me afterward told me everything I needed to know. Thomas had his own complicated family history, which perhaps made it easier for him to understand mine. His father had abandoned the family when he was young, and he had been raised by a single mother who struggled with depression. He knew what it meant to create your own definition of family. With my career advancing, my support system growing, and a healthy relationship developing, I finally felt secure enough to establish an online presence. I created bare-bones social media accounts under my real name, but kept them private and limited. I still worried about my family finding me, but I refused to live in hiding forever. In my 5th year in Seattle, I was offered a position as marketing director at an up-and-coming tech company. The salary was double what I had been making, with stock options and a team of my own to manage. When I called Grandma Eleanor to share the news, she cried with pride. "I always knew you had this in you," she said. "I just wish the rest of the family could see you now." "I'm glad they can't," I replied honestly. "This is mine. I did this without them, in spite of them." My apartment upgraded to a small but bright 1-bedroom with a view of Elliott Bay. I could afford nice clothes, occasional travel, and even started a modest investment portfolio. Thomas and I had moved in together, adopting a rescue dog named Pepper, who became the center of our shared life. For the first time since I could remember, I was truly happy, not the artificial, walking on eggshells happiness I had pretended to feel in my parents' house, but genuine contentment. I went to sleep without anxiety and woke up looking forward to the day ahead. I had friends who knew the real me and loved me anyway. I had work that challenged and fulfilled me. I had a partner who supported my growth, rather than undermining it. What I did not have was contact with my parents or Amanda. I had blocked their numbers, filtered their emails, and effectively erased them from my daily life. Occasionally, through Grandma Eleanor, I would get updates. Amanda and James had gotten married in what my grandmother described as an obscenely expensive ceremony. My parents had both retired early, apparently living quite well despite some financial difficulties my grandmother was vague about. I felt nothing but distant pity when I heard these updates. The people she described felt like characters in a book I had read long ago. Not people who had once held the power to destroy me. That was perhaps the greatest victory of all. They had become irrelevant to my happiness. But life has a way of bringing even the most carefully separated paths back together. And mine was about to collide with my past in a way I could never have anticipated. The call came on a Sunday evening as Thomas and I were preparing dinner. Pepper was underfoot as usual, hoping for dropped scraps. My special grandma phone rang, and I answered with a smile, balancing it between my ear and shoulder as I chopped vegetables. "Deidre, dear," my grandmother's voice sounded frailer than I remembered. "How are you?" We chatted for a few minutes about my work and the unusually warm Seattle spring. Then her tone changed. "I need to talk to you about something important," she said, and my knife paused mid-chop. "What is it? Are you okay?" "Physically, I'm as well as can be expected at my age. But the doctor found some irregularities in my last checkup. Nothing definite yet, but, well, time becomes more precious when you're 80. My heart sank. What can I do? "My birthday is next month," she continued. "My 80th. Your mother is planning a party, a big one, and I would very much like you to be there." The knife clattered onto the cutting board. Thomas looked up in alarm. "Grandma, you know I can't. It's been 7 years, Deidre. 7 years since I've seen your face except in pictures you send. I don't know how many birthdays I have left. Would it be so terrible to come for just one weekend? For me?" I closed my eyes, feeling the careful walls I had built beginning to crack. "They'll make it a nightmare." "You know they will. I've spoken to your mother. She's promised everyone will be on their best behavior." I laughed bitterly. "And you believe her?" There was a pause. "No," my grandmother admitted. "But I believe in you. You're stronger now. You're not the girl who left 7 years ago. Nothing they say or do can take away what you've built." Thomas had moved closer, his hand on my back in silent support, though he could only hear my side of the conversation. "When is it?" I asked finally. 3 weeks from Saturday. At the Harborview restaurant downtown. I know it's short notice, but I hoped. "I'll think about it," I promised. "I just need some time." "That's all I ask, dear. Whatever you decide, I love you." "I love you too, Grandma." When I hung up, Thomas was already pouring me a glass of wine. I explained the situation as we finished preparing dinner, my hands slightly shaking. "What do you think I should do?" I asked him after laying out all the facts. "I think you should do whatever feels right for you," he said carefully. "But I also think you might regret it if you miss this chance to see your grandmother. She won't be around forever. Would you come with me, if I went?" "Try and stop me," he smiled, taking my hand across the table. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining different versions of the party, most ending in disaster. In one scenario, my father caused a scene. In another, Amanda humiliated me in front of everyone. In the worst version, they somehow convinced Grandma Eleanor that I had abandoned the family out of selfishness, turning her against me. The next day, I called Dr. Sarah and scheduled an emergency session. We spent an hour working through my fears and developing coping strategies. She reminded me that I was no longer financially or emotionally dependent on my family. I could leave anytime. I could set boundaries. I could bring support. "The question isn't whether they've changed," she said. "It's whether you've changed enough that their behavior no longer has power over you." That evening, I found myself scrolling through my mother's Facebook page. I had never unfriended her, just muted and ignored her. Her profile was filled with carefully curated family photos. Holiday gatherings, vacations, Amanda and James featuring prominently in many of them. One recent photo caught my attention. It showed Amanda, looking perfectly polished as always, standing between my parents at some charity event. But there was something in her expression, a tightness around her eyes, that struck me as familiar. It was the same look I used to have in family photos, the strain of maintaining appearances. On impulse, I sent Amanda a text message. We had not communicated in 7 years, but I still had her number saved in my old contacts. "This is Deidre. Grandma Eleanor invited me to her birthday. Before I decide whether to come, I wanted to check if you have any objections." I waited, watching the dots appear and disappear several times. Finally, her response came through. "How nice to hear from you after all this time. Of course you should come. Grandma would be delighted. We all would." The message was polite, even warm on the surface. But I had spent a lifetime decoding Amanda's communications. The excessive formality, the way she spoke for all of them. There was something calculated there that made me uneasy. I tried again. I just want to make sure my presence won't cause problems. We didn't exactly part on good terms. This time, the response was quicker. Ancient history. We're family. See you at the party. The conversation left me more unsettled than before. It was too easy, too neat. The Amanda I knew would never let go of a grudge so simply. Still undecided, I called my mother the next day. The conversation was surreal. She acted as if I had been away on a long vacation, not estranged for 7 years after a massive falling out. Deidre, darling, what a lovely surprise. We were just talking about you the other day. Were you? I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. Of course. Your father and I always wonder how you're doing in. Where was it again? Portland? Seattle? Right, Seattle. How silly of me. Well, we're so excited you're coming to Mom's party. She's been quite insistent about having everyone there. No acknowledgement of our estrangement. No mention of the identity theft or the awful things said the last time we spoke. It was gaslighting of the highest order, attempting to rewrite history completely. I haven't decided if I'm coming yet, I said firmly. But you must. Mom would be crushed if you didn't. She's not been well, you know. The guilt trip, right on schedule. Some things never changed. If I do come, I said, choosing my words carefully, I'll be bringing my partner, Thomas. A boyfriend? How wonderful. Is it serious? The fake enthusiasm made my skin crawl. Very. We live together. Well, bring him along. The more the merrier. I can't wait to see you, sweetheart. It's been too long. When we hung up, I felt physically ill. The conversation had confirmed all my fears about how fake and manipulative the reunion would be. But it had also strengthened my resolve. I would go, not for them, but for Grandma Eleanor, and I would go prepared. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas and I made arrangements. We booked flights to Boston and a hotel room downtown, deliberately avoiding staying with family. I scheduled another session with Dr. Sarah to develop coping strategies. I even prepared exit plans, from polite excuses to leave early to the nuclear option of walking out mid-party if necessary. As our departure date approached, the nightmares intensified. I dreamed of being trapped in my childhood home, of sinking into quicksand while my family watched and laughed. Thomas would wake me gently, holding me until my breathing steadied. We can still cancel, he offered the night before our flight. Your grandmother would understand. I shook my head. No, I need to do this, not just for her, but for me. I need to show them and myself that they have no power over me anymore. But as our plane took off the next morning, I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. The Boston air felt different somehow, heavier with memories. As our taxi pulled away from Logan Airport, I found myself gripping Thomas's hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. You okay? He asked quietly. No, I admitted, but I will be. Our hotel was downtown, just 3 blocks from the Harborview restaurant where the party would be held the following evening. We checked in, freshened up, and headed out for a walk along the harbor. I had forgotten how beautiful Boston could be in early summer, with sailboats dotting the water and the historic buildings gleaming in the sunshine. So this is where little Deidre grew up, Thomas mused, putting his arm around me as we walked. I can picture you here. Not here, I corrected him. I rarely came downtown as a kid. We were strictly suburbs, with occasional approved cultural excursions. We had arranged to meet my grandmother for tea that afternoon, away from the rest of the family. I wanted our reunion to be private, not a spectacle for everyone else. The assisted living facility where she now lived was elegant and well-maintained, with gardens and a view of the Charles River. When the receptionist led us to her apartment, I paused outside the door, suddenly terrified. What if she had changed? What if I had built her up in my memory to be more supportive than she really was? Thomas gave me an encouraging nod and I knocked. The door opened, and there she was. Smaller than I remembered, more stooped, her hair completely white now. But her eyes were the same, bright and full of love. "Deidre," she whispered, and opened her arms. I fell into her embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender. All my doubts vanished in that moment. This was real. This was love without conditions or manipulation. "Let me look at you," she said, pulling back to hold me at arm's length. "My goodness, what a beautiful, strong woman you've become." We sat in her small living room as she fussed over serving us tea and cookies she had baked herself. I introduced Thomas, and she immediately took to him, asking thoughtful questions about his work and interests. She showed genuine delight when she learned we had been together for nearly 3 years. "You found your person," she said approvingly. "I always knew you would." Only when we had settled in did she broach the subject of the family. "They know you're coming," she said. "Your mother has been in quite a state, redecorating the house even though the party isn't even there." "Appearances matter more than substance," I said. "Some things never change." "And some things do," she replied cryptically. "You might be surprised." We spent 2 hours with her, catching up properly in a way our phone calls hadn't allowed. She showed me photos of her great-grandchildren, Amanda's 2 boys that I had never met. They looked like perfect little copies of James, with Amanda's sharp eyes. I felt a strange pang seeing them. These nephews who did not even know I existed. As we were leaving, my grandmother held me back for a moment. "Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that I am proud of you," she said quietly. "The life you've built, the woman you've become, nothing that happens can change that." Her words felt ominous, as if she was preparing me for something. But before I could question her further, she changed the subject, reminding us of the party details. That evening, my parents had arranged a small family dinner at their house, ostensibly to welcome me home. Thomas and I took a rideshare to the familiar suburban street, and I felt my anxiety mounting with each passing mile. The house looked exactly the same. Same perfect lawn, same blue shutters, same brass knocker on the front door that I had polished countless times as a childhood chore. Thomas whispered, "I love you," as I raised my hand to knock, and then the door swung open. My mother stood there, looking eerily unchanged. Same perfectly dyed blonde hair, same pearl earrings, same fixed smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Deidre," she exclaimed, as if I was a college friend she hadn't seen in a semester, not her estranged daughter. "You look wonderful. A bit thin, perhaps, but the West Coast style suits you." The backhanded compliment, delivered with a smile. Another thing that hadn't changed. "This must be Thomas," she continued, turning her focus to him. "How handsome. Come in, come in. Everyone's so excited to see you." Everyone turned out to be my father, Amanda and James, and their 2 boys, ages 5 and 3. The younger generation was introduced as your nephews, Aiden and Jack. They regarded me with the suspicious look children reserve for unfamiliar adults who are supposedly relatives. My father offered a stiff handshake to both Thomas and me. "Good to see you, Deidre. You're looking well." No acknowledgement of our estrangement. No mention of the awful things said the last time we were together. Just pleasantries, as if I had been away on business. Amanda was the last to greet me. She looked flawless as always, in an expensive dress and perfect makeup. But there was something tight about her smile, something calculated in her eyes. "The prodigal sister returns," she said lightly, air kissing near my cheeks. "Seattle must agree with you." "It does," I said simply. James was more genuine, offering a warm handshake and seemingly pleased to see me. "I've heard a lot about you," he said, which made me wonder exactly what version of me Amanda had described to him over the years. Dinner was a masterclass in surface-level conversation and strategic avoidance. My mother asked carefully generic questions about my job in advertising, as she called it, though I had mentioned it was a marketing director position. My father talked about his retirement golf game and recent investments. Amanda discussed the boys' private preschool and their early signs of giftedness. Not once did anyone mention the fraud, the fight, or the 7 years of silence. It was as if they had collectively agreed to present an alternate reality where I had simply moved away for work, not fled from toxic abuse. Thomas handled it all beautifully, making appropriate conversation, while occasionally squeezing my hand under the table when the tension became particularly thick. I focused on breathing evenly and reminding myself that I was here for Grandma Eleanor, nothing more. After dessert, while Amanda was upstairs putting the boys to bed, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I passed the study, I overheard my father and James in conversation. "Everything set for tomorrow?" my father was asking. "Amanda assures me it is," James replied, sounding uncomfortable. "Though I still think this whole plan is excessive." "Nonsense," my father said dismissively. "It's time certain truths came to light. Eleanor deserves to know everything before before it's too late." I hurried past, my heart pounding. What plan were they talking about? What truths did they think needed to come out? When I returned to the dining room, Amanda was back, sitting unusually close to my mother, both of them falling silent as I entered. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. They were plotting something, I was certain of it. The rest of the evening continued in the same vein of forced pleasantry. As we prepared to leave, Amanda pulled me aside for a moment. "It really is good to see you, Deidre," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Tomorrow will be quite the reunion. The whole family will finally have closure." The way she emphasized closure sent a chill down my spine. In the taxi back to our hotel, I told Thomas everything I had overheard. "They're planning something for tomorrow," I concluded. "Something to do with truths coming out." Thomas looked concerned. "Do you want to skip the party? We could take your grandmother out for a private lunch instead." I considered it. Part of me wanted to run far away from whatever trap was being set. But another part, the stronger part, refused to be chased away. "No," I said finally. "I'm not going to let them drive me away. Whatever they're planning, I can handle it. I'm not the same person they can manipulate and control anymore." Back in our hotel room, I locked myself in the bathroom and had a full-blown panic attack, something that hadn't happened in years. Sitting on the cold tile floor, gasping for breath, I texted Dr. Sarah. "They're planning something. I'm terrified." Her response came quickly. "Remember, you have the power to leave at any time. Their opinions don't define you. You've built a life they know nothing about. That's your truth." I splashed water on my face, looked in the mirror, and repeated her words. My truth, my life, my choices. Whatever storm was coming, I would weather it. I had survived their worst before. I could do it again. The Harborview restaurant was Boston's premier waterfront dining establishment. With floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor and white tablecloths that probably cost more than my first month's rent in Seattle. As Thomas and I approached the private room that had been reserved for the party, I took one last deep breath. "Ready?" he asked, straightening his tie. "As I'll ever be," I replied, fixing a smile on my face. The room was already half full when we entered. Extended family members I barely recognized. Some of my grandmother's friends from her bridge club. A few neighbors from my parents' street. I saw my cousin Liam, who gave me a genuine smile and wave. He had always been kind to me, though we had never been particularly close. My grandmother sat at the head table, looking elegant in a blue dress that matched her eyes. When she spotted me, her face lit up. I made my way to her immediately, leaning down to kiss her cheek. "Happy birthday, Grandma." "You came," she said, squeezing my hand. "That's the best gift I could have asked for." I introduced her to Thomas properly, and she insisted he sit next to her so they could get to know each other better. I took the seat on her other side, feeling slightly more at ease with this buffer between me and the rest of the family. My parents arrived next, my mother making a grand entrance in an expensive dress that was at least a decade too young for her. My father followed, nodding stiffly to various guests. They made their way around the room, playing the perfect hosts, before coming to greet my grandmother. "Mom, you look wonderful," my mother gushed, kissing her cheek. 80 years young." "Thank you, Catherine," my grandmother replied coolly. I noticed she did not correct the age comment, though she had always hated that particular cliché. The real tension arrived with Amanda and James. They entered like visiting royalty. Amanda in a designer dress I recognized from recent fashion magazines, James in a perfectly tailored suit. Their boys had been left with a sitter, Amanda explained to everyone who asked, because this is an adult celebration. The meal itself was exquisite, course after course of gourmet food paired with expensive wines. Conversation flowed around me, mostly superficial pleasantries and catching up between relatives who rarely saw each other. I stayed quiet, speaking only when directly addressed, watching Amanda carefully. She seemed unusually animated, checking her watch frequently and exchanging meaningful glances with my father. After the main course, but before dessert, Amanda stood up and tapped her glass for attention. The room fell silent. "Before we bring out Grandma Eleanor's birthday cake, I have a special presentation," she announced, her voice carrying easily across the room. "As many of you know, our family has been through some challenges in recent years." My stomach dropped. Here it came. 7 years ago, my sister Deidre left Boston rather suddenly. There have been many questions about why she chose to cut off contact with our family. All eyes turned to me. I felt the blood drain from my face, but kept my expression neutral. Thomas's hand found mine under the table. When Deidre agreed to come to this party, I decided it was finally time for the whole family to know the truth. So I took the liberty of hiring private investigators to look into her life in Seattle. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. My grandmother's hand tightened on her napkin. "Amanda, this is hardly the time or place," James said quietly, but she ignored him. "I have the full report here," she continued, holding up a thick manila envelope. "And I think Grandma Eleanor deserves to know exactly who she's been so proud of all these years." My grandmother stood up slowly, her voice surprisingly strong. "Amanda, stop this right now." But Amanda was already opening the envelope. "The truth needs to come out. For the family's sake." I sat frozen, my mind racing. What could they possibly have found? I had nothing to hide. My life in Seattle was ordinary, hardworking, honest. Amanda pulled out a stack of papers and began reading. Deidre Louise Morgan. Current address: 723 Highland Avenue, Seattle. Position: Marketing Director at Tech Future Innovations. Salary: $135,000 annually, plus bonuses. She looked up, her expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. Apparently, my sister has been quite successful while she's been ignoring her family obligations. I felt a bizarre urge to laugh. Was this the big reveal? That I had a good job? Amanda continued reading. No criminal record, no bankruptcies, no marriages or divorces. Currently in a long-term relationship with Thomas William Harrington, software engineer. The room had gone completely silent. This was clearly not the scandalous exposé everyone had been led to expect. "Is that it?" my grandmother asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. "No," Amanda said, flipping to the next page. "There's more. The investigators were very thorough. They also looked into why Deidre might have left so suddenly 7 years ago." Now my heart truly began to race. What had they found? "They discovered some interesting financial transactions," Amanda continued, her voice suddenly less confident. "Apparently there were student loans taken out in Deidre's name without her knowledge or consent." My father stood up abruptly. "That's enough, Amanda." But she wasn't stopping. The investigators followed the money trail. Those loans, totaling over $60,000, were transferred directly to accounts belonging to Richard Morgan, my father. The room erupted in shocked whispers. My father's face had gone purple with rage or embarrassment. I couldn't tell which. Furthermore, Amanda pressed on, though her voice was shaking now, the investigators found a pattern of similar financial fraud involving multiple family members, including me. This wasn't going according to her plan. The private investigators she had hired had been more thorough than she expected, uncovering the very things she had hoped to keep hidden. "Amanda, stop this immediately," my father commanded. "No, Dad. You told me this report would prove Deidre had been lying about why she left. That it would show she abandoned the family because she was selfish and ungrateful. That's what you promised." James was staring at Amanda with a look of dawning comprehension. "You told me this was about getting closure, about healing the family rift." "It is," Amanda insisted. But her composure was cracking. "But the report, it doesn't say what it was supposed to say." My grandmother slowly rose to her feet again. "Perhaps that's because the truth isn't what you thought it was, Amanda." The PI report wasn't finished revealing its secrets. Amanda, now flustered, accidentally dropped several pages. As James helped gather them, his expression changed from confusion to shock. "What is this?" he asked, holding up a document. "These are transfers from Eleanor's accounts to yours, Amanda. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 5 years." The room went completely still. That's for safekeeping," Amanda stammered. "Grandma asked me to manage some of her finances." My grandmother's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I did no such thing. It's a mistake," my father interjected quickly. "The investigators clearly got their facts wrong." "Did they?" James asked, continuing to read through the papers. "Because there's quite a detailed trail here. Eleanor's retirement accounts, slowly drained. Her house, remortgaged without her knowledge. Power of attorney documents with signatures that look questionable." My mother had gone completely white. My father was pulling at his collar as if it was choking him. Amanda looked like she might faint. James turned to my grandmother. "Eleanor, did you authorize any of these transactions?" "No," she said simply. "I did not." The chaos that followed was both terrible and vindicating. Extended family members who had always seen my parents and Amanda as pillars of respectability were now looking at them with horror and disgust. James was on his phone, apparently calling his lawyer. My mother was crying quietly in her seat. My father was attempting to explain away the evidence, but his protest sounded hollow even to my ears. Throughout it all, my grandmother remained remarkably calm. When the initial shock had subsided somewhat, she stood once more and addressed the room. "I have known for some time that certain members of my family have been taking advantage of me," she said, her voice steady. "What I didn't know was the extent of it, or that the same had been done to Deidre. Today has been illuminating for all of us, though perhaps not in the way Amanda intended." She turned to me, taking my hand. "Deidre left because she was abused, financially and emotionally. She rebuilt her life from nothing, through her own hard work and integrity. I have always been proud of her, but never more than I am today." Amanda was openly sobbing now, her perfect makeup streaking down her face. "You don't understand. Dad said we needed the money. He said you had plenty and would want to help if you knew. He said Deidre deserved what happened to her because she was always so difficult and ungrateful." "And you believed him," I said, finally finding my voice. "You always believed him, even when you knew he was lying." James was looking at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "I had no idea," he said to no one in particular, "about any of this." "Of course you didn't," my grandmother said kindly. "Amanda has always been very good at presenting the version of reality she wants people to see." The party was effectively over after that. Guests began making awkward excuses to leave. James told Amanda he would see her at home, his voice cold. My parents huddled in a corner with their heads together, no doubt strategizing damage control. In the midst of this implosion, my grandmother turned to me with remarkable composure. "I think I'd like to leave now, if you don't mind. Perhaps you and Thomas could take me for ice cream? I always did prefer that to fancy cakes." As we helped her into her coat, she leaned close and whispered, "Karma arrives quietly sometimes, doesn't it? But when it does, everyone hears the thunder." The fallout from my grandmother's birthday party was swift and far-reaching. Within a week, James had filed for separation from Amanda and moved out of their Beacon Hill house, taking the boys with him temporarily while he sorted things out. My father faced potential criminal charges for financial fraud and elder abuse, though his expensive lawyers were working overtime to reach a settlement. My mother, in a surprising turn of events, moved out of the family home and into a small apartment, claiming she had been misled like everyone else. Through it all, my grandmother maintained her dignity and grace. The day after the party, she asked Thomas and me to come to her apartment for a serious conversation. "I've made a decision," she announced without preamble. "I'd like to sell my condo here and move to Seattle. If you'll help me find a place near you, that is." I was stunned. "But Grandma, your whole life is here. Your friends, your bridge club, your garden." She waved away my concerns. "Friends can be visited. Bridge clubs exist everywhere, and I'm too old to be kneeling in garden dirt anyway. What I want now is to spend whatever time I have left with the family member who has shown me genuine love and respect. Of course we'll help, Thomas said warmly. There's a very nice assisted living community just 3 blocks from our apartment. I've heard their garden club is excellent. And so it was decided. Within 2 months, my grandmother had sold her Boston condo, set up a new team of financial advisors, with Thomas's careful oversight, and moved into Lakeside Senior Living in Seattle. The money recovered from my father and Amanda was enough to keep her comfortable for the rest of her life, with plenty left over. The legal consequences continued to unfold over the following year. My father eventually accepted a plea deal that kept him out of prison, but placed him under house arrest and required full restitution to both my grandmother and me. Amanda narrowly avoided criminal charges, but was required to complete community service and financial counseling. The scandal effectively ended her carefully cultivated social standing in Boston. As for James, he reached out to me privately after filing for divorce. I wanted you to know that I had no idea what was happening, he told me over coffee during a business trip to Seattle. I feel like such a fool for not seeing it. Amanda has always been good at showing people exactly what she wants them to see, I said, feeling a strange empathy for him. And you wanted to see a loving, normal family. We all did. He was doing his best with the boys, trying to shield them from the worst of the family drama, while also being honest with them in age-appropriate ways. I don't want them growing up thinking that kind of behavior is acceptable, he explained. I want them to know their Aunt Deidre, to see that there's another way to live. My relationship with my mother evolved in unexpected ways. After separating from my father, she seemed to emerge from a decades-long fog. She began therapy, joined Al-Anon, and slowly, tentatively reached out to rebuild some kind of relationship with me. It wasn't easy, and there were many difficult conversations about the past, but we established a cautious connection based on her genuine remorse and my willingness to forgive, if not forget. Amanda was another story. The humiliation of having her plan backfire so spectacularly sent her into a spiral of denial and blame. Her initial attempts to contact me were full of justifications and accusations. "You don't understand what Dad put me through," she wrote in one email. "You got to escape. I had to stay and deal with everything." I didn't respond. Some relationships cannot and should not be salvaged. The damage was too deep, the patterns too ingrained. I wished her healing, but from a permanent distance. Grandma Eleanor flourished in Seattle. She quickly made friends in her new community, joined not 1 but 2 bridge clubs, and became something of a surrogate grandmother to Jasmine and Marcus as well. Thomas adored her, often stopping by on his way home from work just to share a cup of tea and hear her stories. Our little family expanded when Thomas proposed the following Christmas. It was a simple, beautiful moment in our apartment, with my grandmother present to give her blessing. We were married 6 months later, in a small ceremony in a Seattle garden, with my chosen family surrounding us. My mother came, alone and subdued, but genuinely happy for me. James brought the boys, now old enough to serve as ring bearers. My father and Amanda were not invited, and their absence felt like a weight lifted rather than a void. Thomas and I bought a small house with a view of the mountains. We adopted a second dog to keep Pepper company. My career continued to advance, with a promotion to VP of Marketing and occasional speaking engagements at industry conferences. Thomas started his own software consultancy. We talked about children, decided to try, and were blessed with a daughter we named Eleanor Joy the following year. Through it all, therapy remained a cornerstone of my healing journey. Dr. Sarah helped me work through the complex emotions that surfaced as my family situation evolved. The anger, the vindication, the lingering grief for what might have been. The occasional, irrational guilt when I thought about Amanda's boys growing up without knowing their aunt. Healing isn't linear, Dr. Sarah reminded me often. And it doesn't mean you have to let toxic people back into your life. It means finding peace with your own story. 2 years after moving to Seattle, my grandmother's health began to decline. It started with small things: forgetfulness, fatigue, then progressed to more serious concerns. When the doctors confirmed late-stage heart failure, she accepted the news with characteristic grace. "I've had a good life," she told me as we sat together in her sunny apartment. And these last years with you have been among the best. I got to see you happy, Deidre. I got to see you loved properly. That's all I ever wanted. She passed peacefully 3 months later, with Thomas and me at her bedside. In her final moments, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Remember, love is the only thing worth keeping. Everything else, especially anger, you can let go of." The grief was profound but clean, unmarred by regrets or unfinished business. We had said everything that needed saying. We had loved each other fully and openly. Her funeral in Seattle was small but meaningful, attended by her new friends and our chosen family. My mother came. Amanda did not. In the years that followed, I found that my grandmother's final advice became my guiding principle. Love was worth keeping. Anger, bitterness, the need for revenge, these were burdens I could set down. Not for my family's sake, but for my own. I still maintained healthy boundaries. My father's occasional attempts to reestablish contact were met with polite but firm distance. My relationship with my mother remained carefully circumscribed. Amanda and I existed in separate universes, connected only through occasional updates about the boys from James. But the power those relationships once held over me was gone. The final victory wasn't about karma or justice, satisfying though those had been. It was about building a life so full of love and purpose that the shadows of the past couldn't reach me anymore. If you're watching this and dealing with toxic family dynamics of your own, remember that sometimes the greatest gift difficult people give you is pushing you to create a better life elsewhere. Family isn't just blood, it's behavior. It's showing up, supporting growth, celebrating success without jealousy. It's love without conditions or manipulation. Have you ever had to distance yourself from toxic relationships to protect your peace? What helped you through that journey? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the family you choose can be the greatest blessing of all.